Aye, Captain. What's up, YouTube? It's Chris Moustache, and I'm going to get into another review. Let's get right in it. So today I'm going to be reviewing Lighthouse, which was directed by Robert Eggers. It's about two lighthouse keepers in the 19th century, and they're stuck in a lighthouse for an undetermined amount of time, and they both have to keep their sanity while stuck together. So let's start off first of how well this film just encapsulates a great mood, a great set of moods that are all along the same family tree, if you may, that really encapsulate what the director was intending for, or what I guess the director is intending for. So there was this raw feeling. It was brutal, it was lonely, it was visceral, it was dreamy, it was bleak. It was all these things that came together from the writing, from the acting, all the way to the production. From the top to the bottom, all together came so nicely, and it really gave this film a deep, rich experience. Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson's characters are so finely crafted in this film, both in terms of the writing, but also in their performances. So first, I'm going to give you a brief overview of their characters. So Willem Dafoe is your classic old-timer, who's a veteran, who's been to this lighthouse many times before, has experience out at sea, and now he's living at this lighthouse, taking care of it. While Robert Pattinson is sort of this mysterious newbie that comes onto shore, really gung-ho, really thinking he can handle this all himself, and he has a mysterious past. So these two, the old and the new, are bound to clash. So this was bound to happen just because of the nature of their characters, the age, and their different life experiences. So that already created a innate conflict that was already born as soon as they stepped foot on this island. Although that there is this innate conflict that is bound to happen between them, Robert Eggers and Max Eggers really take their time to develop that conflict. It doesn't happen outright, because any conflict in this kind of situation, in the story itself, doesn't seem like it would just happen without any precedence. It is a slow burn. It will happen over time. So I really like that they took their time and had the patience to really develop the conflict in a really concrete and succinct way. So both Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson's performances were phenomenal. So let's start with Willem Dafoe first. His character that he creates is such a caricature. It's so exaggerated that it is both comedic but also encapsulating. So his way of just holding himself, the way he moves, the physical behaviors, as well as speaking in poems and having a leadership style that's very much like a dictator. He just barks orders and tells Robert Pattinson to do it without any question. So I really enjoyed that aspect of Willem Dafoe's, what he brought to the table. And Robert Pattinson, on the other hand, his character and the way he portrayed him was very interesting because his character developed over time. While Willem Dafoe was pretty much the same from beginning to end, Robert Pattinson has an ebb and flow to him. So he starts out as a submissive, obedient newcomer, like many of us have experienced, and I'm sure if you've ever had a job before, you know when you're on your first day of your job, you're going to be very nice, you're going to listen to everything that the old-timer has to say and do exactly what they say. But as the film progresses and as the conflict ensues, as we get into Act 2, when we realize that they are stuck on that island, his demeanor changes, and it wavers between that submissive obedience to confidence and bold that he didn't really display before. So we really see that development over time and the way that he really asserts his dominance in this relationship as the film progresses. And this is not going to spoil the movie, but it's even in the IMDb description of this film. So when both these characters delve into madness, the performance from Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson is so crisp. They did not outright go 100% every time when they were given this rage moment or this lunacy moment. They went back and forth. Depending on the scene, they really were able to dial it back when it was necessary and also go full-blown when the time called for it. So I really thought that was a very artful way and a very masterful way to see that both Pattinson and Dafoe were able to control their characters and control their emotions in a very subtle way. Besides the characters, I also like that the writing was very reminiscent of older styles of writing. It wasn't your traditional contemporary fast-paced, a lot of fast-talking characters that are very snarky and always have something funny to say. It was very real. It was very purposeful. Everything they said was sprinkled into what would contribute to the plot later on. Nothing they said felt superfluous. It didn't feel like they were just trying to get a gag out of us. It didn't feel like it was just to assert any sort of character traits that we need to know of, they did that at the same time while also developing a plot. So it was all happening concurrently. It didn't happen like it was separate. It didn't feel like, oh, this scene is just meant to show, oh, this is what Robert Pattinson's character is like, this is why you should like him. No, it felt like that the plot was progressing and things were moving along, as well as we were learning more about the characters and also saw how their dynamic was changing. And the greatest part is about the way that they decided to reveal the character stories was that they always centered it around a dining room table, and there were barriers to them talking to each other about their past. It didn't come out forthright. In other movies, that really just comes to mind is Annihilation, where these characters just reveal everything about themselves very early on in a relationship. In most people's experiences, it takes time, and you gotta peel away the layers to learn something very intimate about someone. Really like the use of organic objects within each scene to tie the whole story together. And when I talk about an organic object, I'm talking about something that's within the story itself. So say, for example, they had a pen or a paper, that was what it was being used for in the film. But what was nice about this, they used it at the beginning and also at the end, and all of it contributed to a foreshadowing of what was to come. So that was what I really liked about the use of those objects. Whether they had a symbolic meaning or a more metaphorical meaning, I do not know. It would take me many months, maybe stuck on an island, grow a beard, get an Irish accent, to really discover what these themes and what these actual symbols were really meant to be besides their literal meaning. And what I like about movies, and this is just my own bias, I really like the indiscriminate boundary between dream and reality. And this happens as the film goes on. It's not very much at the very beginning. It's sprinkled in, but it really goes full ramp as the film goes on and as the madness ensues. So I always like that type of storytelling, and I really enjoy that part. So along with all these literary elements, I really like the cinematography in this film. So what really caught my eye the most about the cinematography was that they used a lot of tripod shots, a lot of stationary shots, which is, again, nostalgic, and it pays a homage to older films. Modern films do it as well, but much more frequently in older films because of budget restrictions, because of time, because of all of these other factors that forced old filmmakers to do it. Robert Eggers decided to do it purposefully in this film. Along with the cinematography, those stationary tripod shots, I also liked the use of dolly, and this motion was mirrored at the beginning and end of the movie. So there's a dolly scene where you get to see the inside of the shack that they'll be living in, and that same scene is mirrored later on. I won't tell you what exactly happens in the later scene, but I like that use of cinematographic, that's a word now, mirroring. So I really enjoyed that they used that from the beginning and the end. I also like that whenever they showed a establishing shot or a wide shot of the island, they kept the island at the lower third of the entire scene. So it really made the island look so much more lonelier, so much more depressing. It really added that sense of bleakness and solitude that really gave this film a great execution from writing all the way up to that cinematography. I even like that they used wider shots to let the scene play out, and then as the conflict progressed, as the two started butting heads more, they started getting closer shots. So even the visual language was changing as the story was changing as well, and I really thought it was clear and it was obvious what they were doing. Alright, when it comes to the music, I thought it was very fitting to every scene. It rose and grew when conflict was arising or when tension was building, and also there was this long droning sound that was laid into the soundtrack in the background constantly, and that always kept me a little bit uneasy and a little bit felt like I was being swallowed by a dream, but also maybe being thrown into a nightmare. And even just to give props to the sound design, I really thought that the use of the lighthouse's horn to constantly remind you that they are on a lighthouse was very great to see or great to hear. It was really great to hear, to always really put us in the perspective of both these characters. So now I'm going to go into my critique of the movie, because I'm not giving this a perfect 10 out of 10. I'm sorry guys, I know maybe you were expecting it, but what I didn't like about this movie, I felt like it was paying an homage to older films and other films before it. And, this is a trait that is very common in most art, and some people like it, some people don't. Me personally, I don't like it when it is an obvious homage. I understand if you get influenced, that's always bound to happen. That there's nothing that's going to stop that from happening. But if you literally do things that other people have done before you, that is also very obvious and very clear, then, it feels like I'm being sort of cheaped out of an experience where the film isn't a world in itself. Because that's what I really like about movies, when it feels like it's its own self-contained world, hasn't been influenced by other filmmakers, other artists. It is its own thing, and you can feel like you're living inside of it, and it's breathing and it's growing, and every time you come back to it, it changes a little bit. But with this film, I felt like it was very obviously an homage, and the homage is to The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's film, so I think that's obvious about getting stir crazy. And also La Ventura, which is also an Italian surrealistic film directed by Antonioni. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And that is the homage to that is more in its visual style instead of its actual story. And obviously we can start thinking about Moby Dick as well as a literature example. So all of these elements were very obviously embedded into this film, which made it feel like it was just supposed to be an homage. It was just supposed to be nostalgia instead of something that's just giving me something new, or at least just containing me in its own world, which it did very well. But I was reminded, because they even say in the dialogue itself at some point where Robert Pattinson calls out Willem Dafoe as being a parody of a character. So that just, I know it's a subtle line, it's just one line, but that just started putting me on the train of thought where I started thinking, oh, how is this like these other things? Is it supposed to be like these other things? Is it just an example of other films in the past? And, other filmmakers have had a lot of success doing this, like Quentin Tarantino or the Coen brothers. So, this is just a personal opinion, a personal bias. I don't like it when it is that obvious, or when it is what was the foundation of a film. And I don't think this was just the foundation, but, as they were building up the film, they started putting in these influences directly into it, and I'm not a big fan of that. What I think would make this film better, and obviously, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not the person that made this, but just random suggestions, things that you could probably have changed the direction of this film. Maybe make the cinematography a little bit more daring than it was, because a lot of the cinematography was very symmetrical, where you put the subject in the middle. A lot of people like that aesthetically, but it is not as daring. It's an easy style to pick when it comes to anything that is your camera choice, when you just put the object right in the middle. I mean, it always looks good, but I think this kind of film could have really benefited from more daring shots, like Dutch angles where the camera is askew, or, more low angles, more disturbing shots, because there weren't as many disturbing shots as I would have liked. It felt like it was made in the 1960s, literally. It didn't feel like this was a movie made in the 21st century, besides knowing that Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are contemporary actors. So that was a couple areas I think they could have been more daring, maybe even with some of the character development too. Maybe make Willem Dafoe's character not an obvious Captain Ahab ripoff. He could have been something more where you play around the fact that he's a lonely old man. Maybe he lies about his past. Maybe, there's a whole bunch of different directions that you could have made this character a little bit more rich. And I think that's where this film could have benefited from. So again, there's a lot to enjoy to this film. So I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10. You heard it from me, 9 out of 10. And I think what it did so well was in its execution, from its acting to its production to its writing. All of it comes so well together. It is a perfect example of directors or a team's intentions played out correctly in a film. The only thing I didn't like was the fact that it felt like an homage. It felt like it really pulled me out of the story when I realized that some of this was not supposed to be as organic as it felt. Like, it really pulled me out of the story when you remind me that these people are characters, that they could be parodies, that they are just art. Because I like films that are very self-contained, that don't make me, don't pull me out like that, unless that is your intention from the very beginning. What I will say, for any of you who are interested in watching this movie, will say it's not a movie for people who don't like silent films, who love fast-paced like movies like James Bond, and that's all they watch, who don't like to think while they're watching a movie, because this movie will make you meditate on its subjects, on the character's intentions, all of these different things about human nature. So this is not a movie for the average moviegoer. That's what I'll say. This is a movie for someone who really enjoys watching movies, who's watched a bunch of different eras, that really just enjoys the art itself and really wants to see something that's refreshing. And what did you guys think of it? Put in the comments below. Remember to subscribe, like it, send me some DMs. We can be friends. Just kidding. No one's my friend.